Hello and welcome to Dell's Gaming, and this is from the depths, and I was in another testing mood after yesterday's little test of missiles. I thought, well, let's give everything out as a test. I was also looking at, there was a comment, plus also I was thinking about it, was Barbette armour. I've got a design I'm working on, and I was looking at a 3-meter thick barbette. So I was looking at, well, what do we need to do to stop a typical sort of round coming in against a 3-meter citadel and or barbette armour, etc., for the main guns, because that seems to be a problem that people have. So I reworked the little test area with some different designs of armour, and also some different APS armour here. Now, I'm not testing crams, which really I suppose I should do, but I'm more aiming at APS and missiles at this time rather than cram. Cram is generally going to be the same for the HE level of damage. Obviously there is some pen, so the pen and HE should be about similar, if you see what I mean, the effect. The main thing with APS is we've got all of those lovely little different type of heads that we can muck around with to try and get a bit of damage. Anyway, the target. So the target now is 3 meters thick. So if I just go over here just to show you example. So it starts off simply with 3 blocks of metal, and then we have wood, 2 at the top, 1 at the bottom, so we can see how much damage actually gets through. The second one is using 2 metal and then a oblique, and I've put the oblique in 2 directions because there's 2 ways you can have this. So does it make an effect if I have it straight against the metal, or against whatever is behind the metal, if that makes sense? So just to see if there is a difference in those. And then the third one is my composite armour. So instead of being, it's still 3 meters thick, but it's actually 1 meter of metal, 1 meter of wood, and then an oblique set in that direction so that there's the biggest gap in case that has an effect or not, and then the wood. So that's my armor types, and the wood here is going to be your turret insides, shall we say. So damage to them would mean potentially something going up boom. And we're mainly aiming at larger guns. So what the testing will be, if I just get back to my character here, is we've got the missiles. So first of all, I'm going to bring up, we have the HE missile, which is what I was testing in the previous video. And the test I wanted to do is with there's a definite propagation of the HE beyond the first level, and it's hardly doing any bloody damage to the front as well. So I wanted to test what happens on thicker metal. So against, at the top, I do actually have a 2 block, and you can see 2 blocks of metal seem to be sort of blocking it. I was actually getting it still going through on 2 blocks of metal a little while ago, and let me just try that one more time. It's great when it doesn't quite always do exactly the same every time. Let me just aim at a different block. So 2 layers of metal seem to be blocking it, and against other things, 3 blocks of metal basically. If I just aim, wait for it to load, and fire, we're actually going through. Yeah, typical. So at an angle, for some reason, that wasn't going through. 3 blocks of metal, it goes through though. So we still have a propagation issue there by the looks of it. Okay. That's a little strange why it wasn't going through the 2 to the metal, but it was going through the 3 to, sorry, 3 blocks to the wood. I'll just try it on some of the other ones as well. So what I'll do is I'm going to fire a missile at each of them and then come back and show you the results. So I wasn't happy with the results on that first run through, so I did run it through a second time with the missile, repaired everything and reloaded, and this time the 2 block we did get the propagation through and it seemed to blow everything up. Against the 3 blocks this time, it did not blow anything up behind. It seems to maybe a little bit of damage on the 3rd block here, but did not damage any of the wood. And here with the oblique armor, that one damaged. On this one, oblique armor doesn't seem to be damaged, and the composite armor doesn't seem to be damaged, and I can't see any damage on the wood in there as well. But so you know, looks like 3 seems to stop the damage passing through. There may be some other reason, but it's not specific. Okay, just going through what I do to repair, and then I won't show that every time, but what I do to repair every time is I go into here, I do a repair, then I stop the repairs and stop it repairing, and then I do a spawn out and spawn in, so hopefully all the blocks are renewed and nothing is showing up as damaged. And the only thing here I can see is maybe that was getting blown up because of that gap there, but anyway, let's leave that one for the moment. Now the next one I'm going to test is going to be a fragmentation missile, just to see if fragmentation can have an effect on these particular armor types. Now I have put a proximity fuse on here, set for 2 meters. I'm going to set it down to 1 meter actually, and then everything else is let's see, fragmentations, and they're all set at 10 degrees. The idea being getting the smallest amount of cone possible. There might be some variation to say to widen that out, because if I'm only going in at 1 meter away and I want to get through 4 meters, that means the angle maybe could be 20 degrees. I'm just going to increase that to 20 to get the maximum possible damage and fragments. There we go, so we've got 3000 damage, we're getting 6 AP, so the APs are not great, and we're getting 18 fragments. Okay, let's give that a go. So what I'm going to do is we'll fire the first one, just to show you what I'm going to do on each of them, is I will fire one at the bottom one, and I'm going to do that on each of them, and then I'll be back once I've got the results. So they've all been now had a firing at each of the targets, even the 2, so it did sort of a very minor surface damage to each of them, and there is no damage gone through or even to a second block. Even fired some at this one. So fragmentation against metal is basically negligible, and okay, we're going to be clear against covered against that at least. So next we're on to the gun. So first of all, I will repair one more time. So with the APS gun, this is a 420mm gun with 3-meter shells. Just happens to be roughly the size I was looking at for a main gun to see what I would need to protect against shells of a similar caliber for a battleship gun. Now each of the APS we'll look at in turn. So first of all, we have a pure HE shell, just to test the HE going through blocks, the same as the missiles. Now it's got a hollow point head, and some of the other ones have a hollow point head, and I'll show you each of them as we go through. That's just to stop the factor of a bounce, so there will be some thump damage, so we would still expect some damage on the front, but we're mainly just seeing what damage we get from the HE. So again, this will take a little while to load, but what I will intend to do is fire one at the lower one and then one at the top one. So I'm going to fire 8 shots in total, and see what the damage is at each stage. So we'll fire one at the lower and then one at the upper, and I'll be back once I've fired at all of the panels. So they've all been shot at, including the 2 at the top. So we've got a lot of surface damage on the pure 3 blocks, but I don't see any wood damage. Again, the 2 oblique panels, it looks like surface damage only, and the composite has taken some damage to the front, actually removing blocks and also some of the wooden blocks behind, but didn't go through the oblique. And I'm guessing that's because it's not got quite such a high AP, because the second layer is not giving that bonus to the front to manage the damage on there, to reduce the damage. So HE's more effective against the composite armor than the other ones. So now what I'm going to do is change ammo and repair, and we'll have a look once we're ready to shoot the next one. So next shot to test is frag. I thought I would test to see what a frag would do. I'll set these at 30 actually. I set the missiles at 20, so I'll try these at 30. So again, we have a hollow point head, so we will get some thump damage, but not much armor piercing, and we've got about 3000 fragment damage at 30 degrees. Very similar to the missile actually. So we shall try that again, firing at each panel, one in the bottom and then one in the top. So that's a frag shell fired at each plate, and actually the results are quite satisfying. Against 2 levels of metal, through and damage. Against the 3, we had good surface damage, and second level is damaged, but not through to the wood. Against oblique styles, damage on is through but not to the wood, so the oblique stopped it in both cases. No difference, but it did go through 2 layers of metal on here. Obviously the AP of 3 layers was beneficial, although the oblique should have been adding extra AP in theory, but obviously less because it's on the 3rd level than a metal block on the 2nd. And finally the composite, well actually that really was quite effective against the composite. Again, the wood is not having an effect on stopping the fragments. So on to the next shell. So the next shell is a pure kinetic round, armor piercing kinetic. Now I had a play with sabot head, armor piercing head and heavy heads, different sabot solids, etc., and this one seemed to be the most consistent of getting enough armor piercing and enough kinetic damage. The sabot had good armor piercing, but the kinetic damage wasn't enough to do enough actual damage, for want of a better word. So this one seemed to work reasonably well. So same process again. I will fire a shot at each of the panels, one at the bottom, one at the top, and I'll be back once I've fired at all of them. So all the panels have had their AP shots, and it seemed to go through 2 metal, and I guess that would started to have damaged the rear. The 3 metal, it's similar to the fragments, it's damaged 1, but I see no damage on the 3rd level, so that's quite good, and no bounces, which is good. Against the oblique, again, through 2 levels of metal, this one has a bit of damage on the oblique, and this one doesn't. I think it looks possibly slightly discoloured, so maybe a bit of damage, but that one's holding up quite nicely. And the composite, again, it did go through. I don't see any damage on the wood, but it's difficult to say. I think it may have held up, but it's effectively, in my view, that's through. It's gone through the last layer, so that's potentially has damaged it. So armor piercing, I think the solid works well. So that works well against frag and the kinetic damage, and also just the HE. So far, actually, solid is working out. These ones actually are all valid as well. I think the solid, though, would last a little longer, but these 2 are also valid against those 3. Now the next one will be a heat round, so let me just load up and get everything repaired. So looking at the shape charge, the heat round we're using here, so we've got a shape charge head, which is, it's generally going for penetration here because we've got quite a thick bit of metal, so I made it mainly based on penetration to get through the metal. With the HE heads, which we'll push this one up to 100% as well, so it's everything is on the shape charge for this 420. No thump head, so we won't get much kinetic or thump damage on this one. So we'll repeat the process, shoot one at the lower and then shoot one at the higher on each of the panels, and I'll be back soon. And let's have a look at the results. So starting at the top, 2 blocks, yep, that went through, and 3 blocks we had penetration, so the shaped charge is effective against 3 blocks of metal, which is good. Oblique armor, you can see no surface damage, and the oblique armor at the back has been destroyed, but in doing so it's blocked the damage going through, and the same on the second one. So does that mean it doesn't matter which way round the oblique armor is attached to the frontal armor, it has the same effect? And the same here on the composite armor. So all 3 have basically blocked the shape charge. So the oblique armor is doing what it's supposed to do, which is basically stop heat rounds. So we have the final test coming up, which is good old HESH, which is a favourite of a lot of people. So we'll be trying that one on the gun. So let me just reload and get this all ready. So the final test is a fairly standard squash head round, and I've made it so that it is all maximised special factor on the HE warhead, so all of the HE is going to the squash head, which gives it a spalling damage of 71,000 according to that, and HESH thump damage of 2,700. So we shall see how this one goes, and same process again. So it's the same on every firing. 1 shot at the bottom one, 1 shot at the top one, and I'll be back in a minute. And the results of that firing, the 2 block, typically, yep, that's done a nice bit of damage there, and on the 3 blocks, yeah, that's really gone through all of the wood at the back and the second level as well. And the oblique armor, well, it seems like the oblique is stopping the HESH to a degree. That was one of the questions I had. Does oblique armor stop the HESH? And it seems to have stopped at this oblique level and not getting propagated to the inside. So the HESH has not made this oblique armor into fragments. The fragments must have been the metal previous, I'm guessing, because I don't see any damage to the wood as such, only the oblique armor. And finally the composite, and that seems to have similarly withstood reasonably well. Okay, that's not too bad. I didn't expect some of that. I thought maybe the HESH would have taken the oblique and the oblique would have been seen as a layer, but it is actually seeing it as an air gap by the looks of it. And yeah, I might give that one more test and just have a play around quickly with some of the settings, because I'm not sure if that is always consistent, but it must be. I mean, I've got 4 shots there, all into an oblique armor area, and none of them have penetrated unless I've done something seriously wrong with this HESH round. No, I think apart from setting it all up to 1 and not having any much base HE, I think that's a fairly normal round. So yeah, I don't think I'll test that again. I think I'm okay with that result. End result then, what have we seen? Not necessarily what I saw, but oblique armor is good. It looks like it does help to stop heat as well as HESH rounds, but well, this is the case with all of these armor. I think all of the attacks, the second shot, etc., might go through. Yes, that's the case in all of these weapons generally, where we're just stopping the one shot takes out everything. Hopefully the second, third, fourth, whatever shot would be on a different block. It would be somewhere else. So every time you're hit, you're obviously increasing the chance of hitting a block that was previously hit, but at the same time you're also repairing. And hopefully the oblique blocks are cheaper to repair than a solid metal block. Of the arms, well, let's go through the damages. So missiles, they're okay because of this propagation damage. HE seems to be propagating through 2 blocks, but not always 3, although I did get that one that goes through 3s. But let's say they fix that so that is no longer the case. Missile HE damage against metal is basically pretty crap. And even fragment damage is pretty crap. We do have the only one I did not do was the shaped charge head, which potentially could be an answer. The problem with using a shaped charge head as such is that if I bring that up there, what do we get up to? Yeah, sort of similar, I think, not quite as high as the APS gun, is you're very limited as to what guidance you can use. You've only got laser beam rider or remote guidance, or just a dumbfire missile basically. So that's the only type of guidance you can use on that missile, which is okay. Remote guidance I think is potentially possible, but yeah, I think that having HE not having very much effect against a metal is a bit, yeah, I would have expected a little bit more damage than we are getting, let's put it that way. HE on APS, again, same as missile. HE just is not effective. The frag was actually quite good. and I think that would be good at blasting away. By the looks of it, it's a good surface blasting shell. That was surprisingly good with a hollow point and some frag. That was actually quite, yeah, as I say, I'm surprised at that, but it was good at blasting away at surface and getting a little bit deep. I think that would be a good little basic shell potentially. The kinetic is a overall good round. I think the only issue with the kinetic is getting bounces, but yeah, in general that would be one thing I found is as soon as you try to put a HE or pen depth fuse in there, unless you have a very long APS round or shell, the armor piercing factor reduces significantly because the drag of the HE just reduces your overall HE and initial damage. I don't know if it's because of drag, but what I mean by that is if we just go back to this APS, if I suddenly just put a HE body in either here, so we've gone from 60, it goes down to 36, which is quite significant and such. And then you would also potentially want a pen depth fuse in there as well. Where is the pen depth? And there we go, pen depth. So as soon as I put that in there, we're down to 29. So yeah, you'd have to have a very long shell to have a HE pen depth shell in that regard. So maybe a cram would be more suitable for doing that because of the way that it packs a shell rather than just creating a base like that. So, but a general kinetic round for is also, I think, is also a good general shot. It was good at just basically working your way through the solid, the top armor. It was a good one. Then we come to the specials, the heat round. So the heat round, obviously oblique armor is stopping it on that first shot, and this is the same for the HESH. So for both of these, the HESH and oblique were both stopping the HESH, which is quite good. Yeah, that working, and means that I can stick with the 3. It's basically acting as an air gap, and I can stop at 3 blocks. I did at one point have this set up with the oblique back 1 level, but that meant actually I had a 4 thickness barbette, which is not what I wanted. It did work quite well against HESH, but the others were going through it quite nicely, quite easily. So overall, looking at the armors, solid armor is simple, but it's good against some things. But HESH, any of the special HESH or shape charge, yeah, asking for problems. So oblique armor seems to be a good option in general. The only one I didn't test is putting the oblique armor in the middle, which could be an interesting one, but I think this type of system, maybe 2 blocks with oblique on the inside, is a good general HESH shape charge stopper, and having the 2 sets of metal at the front means it's reasonable against HE and kinetic. Now, lots of people will know this already, and I'm sure it's of no particular interest to some, but it was interesting and also testing to see how the various damages work against metal targets, against heavy armor, light armor. You'd have to do some other tests, but my particular area I'm looking at the moment is against heavy armor and the ship against metal blocks, and the ship I'm building, I'm trying to use metal blocks, not heavy armor. So that's why I am testing this one, and I think it's the most common type of build. You unless you're making a million resource point ship, you're not going to use heavy armor everywhere. It's going to be used sparingly, shall we say. Most of the time you're just going to want to use normal metal blocks. Lasers, I didn't test lasers with this. suppose I should do, but some other people are quite good with lasers. I'm not a great laser builder, and as I say, the people I was up against aren't going to be using lasers that much. They will more use APS guns with HESH and AP type of ammo, so that is also why this particular test was done this way. You could test things to the absolute nth degree. Sometimes though random factors come in, such as angles. We're doing this fairly straight on, some of them a slight angle, but did that have an effect? The fact that not every single one is straight on, and would some of the rounds have an effect if I was firing at a 45 degrees to the metal? Well, yes, sometimes I'm going to get bounces. With the hollow points, I'm not going to get bounces, but does it have an effect of the way it's going through the armour? Too many variables. We'll leave it at that. You could test this for days and days. Any comments? Down below. As always, keep playing the game and have fun.